up in Trinidad and Tobago, in the southern part of the island, enjoying things children typically do. Summers at the beach, bike rides, curry, doubles, pilau, and kalaloo. Except my childhood wasn't normal. See, my parents lived in a domestic violence relationship. And from the time I was a child, I witnessed domestic violence in all its forms: financial, emotional, verbal, and physical. By the age of 10, I had attended 4 different primary schools and called 5 places home. When I was a baby, my mother decided she could not take the abuse and violence anymore. She packed our baby bottles and our bags, and she headed to the beach to end this journey of life. When she got there, she thought about her children. She thought about my brother, and she said to herself, he would be okay. He would adapt, and he would get through life. And then she thought about me, her baby daughter, and she said her daughter will never know how much her mother loves her. And on that fateful day, she made a life-changing decision to live, to embrace life. She returned home to many years of abuse and violence. In this picture behind me, I was 5 years old when my father locked my mother out of the house with nothing but car keys in her hands. I remember that first night she slept in the car outside. After that, the only place I saw her was at school, where she visited with colored markers and those chocolates that I loved. In secondary school, I remember being so excited for the new school term. Shirts were ironed, books were papered, and then they got into another huge fight. We had less than 2 minutes to grab as many things as we could as we ran to safety at my grandmother's. This is a painful memory for me to bring up and to talk about today. And as a young Muslim woman, for many years, I chose to bury these memories and get as far away from Trinidad and Tobago as I could. Until recently, a colleague challenged me to speak my truth for the very first time in front of more than 200 people. I was terrified, and it was a heart-wrenching experience. But when I did, something amazing happened. Because for the first time, I had freed myself, and I had taken my power back. I was able to call my dad, forgive him, tell him how much I still loved him. His response, Alhamdulillah, thank God, I've prayed for this day for many years. And that freed me to go on and work with rape survivors and domestic violence survivors all across the world, from the Democratic Republic of Congo to the Middle East, now to Trinidad and Tobago. And every time I found the courage and bravery to share my story, something amazing happened. I no longer was a bystander in other person's lives. They heard me speak and they spoke out. They identified with what I was saying. And for the first time, many of them were able to rise above their situations and take that first step to change their lives. According to the UN, 1 out of every 3 women will survive violence in their lifetimes. That means that if there are 240 women present today, at least 80 are survivors. I want you to think about that. Think about the person seated next to you, the person you shared coffee with this morning, and the person you said hi to as you walked into the building. And in most cases, while silence means that we are neutral, that we've taken neither the side of the oppressor nor of the survivor, In cases of violence against women, silence actually multiplies violence. Allow me to explain this using the economic theory known as the multiplier effect. In economics, if, for example, government spends $2 million on small and micro enterprises, and those SMEs take that money and spend it on their employees, and their employees take that money and buy goods and services from the agricultural sector, and the farmers take that money and they buy seeds and they buy manure for their farm, that initial $2 million in government spending has actually multiplied into maybe $4 or $5 million, generating economic growth. Let me apply the multiplier effect to cases of violence against women. And this is a real story that I'll share with you. A, for example, was molested by her uncle as a child. This scarred her emotionally and physically. It took her more than 4 decades before she was able to share her truth for the very first time. And when she did, she was shocked, because in those 40 years, the same uncle had also molested 4 of her other family members. How would the situation have been different if she had found just one person she trusted and spoken out? If she had said, "This is what happened to me," would he have been punished? Would he have gotten help? Would B, C, D, and E have lived a normal childhood? I don't have the answers, but what this example shows us is that each one of us in the audience has the power to make a difference, not just in our own lives, but in the lives of many of those around us. And what about cases of domestic violence? Many, like my mother, suffer in silence for years. What often starts as emotional and verbal taunts become lashes, become beatings, sometimes even ends in murder. We were lucky. After 15 years of abuse, my mother spoke out. She found the courage, she filed for divorce, and she ended the cycle of violence for my brother and I for many years to come. And what about the children? Studies show that while a child may not even be physically injured, children mentally experience the same trauma their mothers go through. In fact, many of them go on to suffer from mental health disorders like depression, addiction, or alcoholism. 4 out of 5 boys who witness their fathers perpetrating violence against their mothers become perpetrators themselves. And many young girls go on to choose abusers as partners and as husbands because as children, they have normalized the violence. So what if you're sitting here today and you're thinking, I'm hearing what you're saying, but this doesn't apply to me because I have no violence in my family? Well, think again. Are you aware of a sexual harassment case at work, but the perpetrator is the CEO, and so all your colleagues and you choose to turn a blind eye? Do you hear your neighbor beating his wife every night, but you choose silence because at the end of the day, that's family business and you're not going to get involved? Are you a teacher or a nurse who is obligated by law to report rape and child sexual abuse, but you don't because you think, what if the perpetrator comes after me? What I want you to know is that while you contemplate speaking out instead of speaking out, that the stigma against violence against women is one of the greatest forms of silencing that there can ever be. I want you to imagine a world with me where young girls can walk down the street safely, where women can go to their partners and their partners are a safe space, where they're not abused or violated. Each one of us has a contribution to make in creating this world. And what about the tangible costs of silence? In a 2014 report called the Conflict and Violence Assessment Paper, written by James Farron and Anne Heffler for the Copenhagen Consensus Center, they quantified the costs of violence. What they found was mind-boggling. For every one person who dies as a result of civil war, 8 people die as a result of domestic disputes. I'll let you think about that for a second. In dollars and cents, what this means is that while globally 170 billion US is spent on civil war, $9.5 trillion is spent on domestic disputes. Look at those figures. This is a huge economic cost to society. And it doesn't stop there. In a 2015 New York Times article, How Often Do Mass Shootings Occur? By Lafreniere, Cohen, and Opel, they referenced that 57% of all mass shooters had a history of domestic violence. 57%. That is 3 out of 5, responsible for the murders of tens of thousands of innocent lives. What if the survivors had spoken out? What if they had gotten help or been punished? How many innocent people would be with us today? And here are 2 stories from 2 amazing survivors I have had the pleasure to work with. Mary survived, their names have been changed for their protection. Mary survived child sexual abuse from a family friend for many years. She never spoke out. Later on, she went on to marry a man who beat her daily, reinforcing her feelings of inferiority and her lack of self-worth. Many years later, she spoke out, found her voice, and left. And by doing that, she changed the history for her amazing daughter for many years to come. Miriam, another beautiful survivor, lived in a relationship of domestic violence for many years. She left, but she never spoke out. This man returned out of the blue years later, raped her, and impregnated her with his child. This time, she filed a police report. So that brings me to you. What if I told you that you have the power to end violence against women by speaking out? See, lucky for us, economics also created the withdrawal effect, which is in effect the opposite of the multiplier effect. So let's go back to this example. If A had spoken out, perhaps B, C, D, and E would have lived normal lives. Even if A didn't have the courage to speak out, and B spoke out, C, D, and E might have lived normal lives. And even if A and B didn't speak out, but C spoke out, D and E may have had the chance of living normal lives. And by changing just one person's life as a child, that means that little child will grow up and not choose a husband who beats her. That means her children may grow up free from violence. So by impacting just one life, you've changed many generations to come. So we need to find our voice, like Anna, another of our amazing survivors, who, after living for 10 years in domestic violence, she found her voice, spoke out, and filed for divorce. Her husband had to be restrained by police. In fact, he was jailed because he tried to attack her and her children. But she stood strong, and by finding her courage, she was able to end violence against women, not just for herself, but for her daughters, for many years to come. And for me, I made this work my life stream. 3.5 years, I founded Conflict Women, which gives me the opportunity to work on a daily basis with amazing survivors, using economics and the market to stop violence against women. We train them to make beautiful handcrafted jewelry, like the pieces I'm wearing today, provide them with a monthly income, free training, and psychological services. And I've witnessed firsthand the change one person or one individual can cause in another's life. And what about you? I want you to join me today in ending the silence and ending violence against women. Here are 5 things that you can do. So if you don't remember anything from the presentation, I want you to remember this. Close. C, create a safe space, whether it's at your home, whether it's in a park, where a survivor can breathe easily and openly and share her story. L, look for red flags. Is he trolling your Facebook, forbidding you from seeing family and friends? Is he monitoring what you're doing, your finances, forcing you to have sex with him when you really don't want to? Is he threatening to attack the family pet? Or is he threatening to injure your children? Think about it. Oh, not every survivor is going to be ready to file a police report, but you can offer resources or support. You can say, here's this great psychologist I know, or this great survivor organization like Conflict Women that you can join. You can even say, I'll take your kids and watch them for the day. S, know that feeling ashamed is one of the greatest forms of silencing. E, exchange the word victim for survivor. I never use the word victim. I try my best not to. Survivor is empowering. It's positive. It says to a woman, you are in charge of your own destiny. And you, no one else but you, decides your future. So what if you're still sitting here today and you're saying, if I walk out of this building and I end my silence, it is going to cause no end of confusion within my family, within my workplace, or within my community. Here's my response to you. The cost of your silence is much, much greater than the cost of you speaking out. In closing, join me today in speaking out and ending the violence against women. Society will not change itself. Society is made up of you and me. So the change must start with us. Together, let us end the war of silence against women. Thank you.